Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to keep a chart on the side so we can have the graphic continually there as we're talking about pieces of it. Okay. Okay, here we go. So okay, here we go. So now we're going around the zodiac. On this chart, Aries will always be on the left, and the Earth will spin, and the houses get put in upside down or right side up. We're used to seeing always houses there, and everything else is put around it. But here, these charts, the zodiac is there, and the houses get put in there as the Earth spins around. The ascendant can be anywhere. So different semantics. But we're going to start looking at the constellation of. Right now, we're not starting at Aries. We're going to start with the constellation of the Ram, which is really over Taurus. Here's the constellation of the Ram. It's the head, body, looking at that's the Ram down in the bottom left corner. Over, it's in sidereal Aries, it's in tropical Taurus. So here's the Ram. It runs from 2 degrees of 2 degrees 45 minutes of Taurus to 20 minutes 15 degrees of Taurus in the tropical zodiac. So Aries, that's this. This was done for 1976. So this is 1950 correspondences. So they're almost a degree out right now. But it's enough to see that these spaces are there. We'll have some charts that fix this in the future. I just like this because it shows the sidereal presence in a bigger way in this chart form. So in the sidereal zodiac, the Ram goes from 8:15 Aries to 25:45 Aries. So if you draw the lines looking in, you'll see there's a space where there's nothing, and there's that dark part there. That's the beginning of Aries, and it ends as a funny little loop there. We'll get to that, but that's because Aries and Taurus overlap. The Ram and the Bull overlap each other 1 degree, and about 19 degrees, 20 degrees Taurus. So these are all subtle little points that have differentiations that make each degree, each section a little more unique. But to find out how to interpret exact words for it takes time. To tune into this, we can begin to start to see these phases, the influences, more coming in through progressions than any other way. You begin to see it. It's subtler. Like the stars are more subtle than the sunlight or than the seasons. So we've got the basic gross matter of fact zodiac, and we've worked with it. And now we're just seeing there's other frequencies going on. So the Bull, if you look, it's down at the bottom to the left about, that would be about 7 o'clock, or at the 7 number on a clock. You see this bunch of, this grouping here is the Pleiades. There's the bullseye, the head of the Bull, body of the Bull. It's a little flattened out to fit on the zodiac. And there's the 2 horns going up. And the Bull is mostly, as you see, it's mostly in Gemini. This is 2,000 years ago, it was mostly in Taurus. It was in a different place. But here the Bull goes, in the tropical zodiac, the Bull starts at 20 degrees of Taurus and runs up to 24 degrees, 30 minutes of Gemini. So those signs will have the Bull watching over it. In the sidereal zodiac, the Bull runs from 25:30 of Aries, sidereal Aries, and runs right up to the end to 30 degrees of Taurus. So it's bigger that way. I don't expect you to memorize all this right now. It's just you're being exposed to it. You're being seen these things. Slowly we'll use these phases. We'll be able to add these sensitivities in. But right now, in seeing this, you can see with this chart form, you put your planets in and you can see what sidereal sign it's in. Someone's talking sidereal, oh, mine's in sidereal Pisces, and mine's, you can go immediately, whereas the sidereal charts are much simpler. They're really from a time before computers and where things were handwritten, and so there's a lot more generalizations and different techniques that come up that way. Here we have it a little more exactly. We could translate directly from one to the other. The constellation, so there's Taurus at this 7 o'clock point, more or less the bottom of your chart. It's ruling over Gemini. And then there's a fairly big empty space between the end of Taurus and the beginning of Gemini. There's no constellation there. In the sidereal zodiac, it's considered part of Gemini. The Gemini starts and runs for 30 degrees, but the first 10 degrees of it, there's no constellation there, no zodiacal constellation there. So to me, this has a special meaning, and we're going to come to these empty spots or twilight zones in between the constellations. So some places direct influence of constellations, sometimes there's not. And this creates another texture of meaning that runs through the zodiac. Through both zodiacs, for me, the sidereal tends to just go into the degrees and translating over. I usually go from the signs to the constellations now, and not hold as strongly to the sidereal degrees. But there's millions of people using astrology that just swear by the sidereal system. So it's good to know you can translate from English to Hindi, or you can use the charts and you can see what's going on, so you don't get confused by the different positions of things in the charts. Okay, so the constellation of the twins comes in, and it's in the zodiac sign, the tropical sign of Cancer, but the twins goes from 4:30 Cancer to 22:15 of Cancer. It's still a small constellation. And then, but it's in the sidereal zodiac, it's between 10 degrees Gemini and 27:45. So it's in the main core of Gemini, but there's a beginning and end where it's not. So these empty spaces, we're going to come to where there's no constellation. It can change the concepts of what rulers are used, or if rulers are used. I mean, there's planets that associate to the constellations, just as there are to the signs. And yeah, rulerships tend to be the same, except in the tropical zodiac, in the West, we use Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and now people are throwing in all kinds of other asteroids, comets, other planets, dwarf planets. But in the sidereal zodiac, they use the planet Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the nodes of the Moon. They don't go out to the outer planets. It has a much simpler foundation, but they're still using the basic rulerships, the traditional rulerships. In the tropical, there's confusion between which we don't use the American rulerships or the modern rulerships. I tended to, after I used them for many years, then I backed off until I came back to the male and female rulership of each planet, and it just made sense. So we've gone over all of that, the rulership, so I'm not going to do it here. Cancer is just a tiny little constellation, 11 degrees. There it is. It's in the zodiac sign of Leo. It's in the sidereal sign of Cancer, but in Leo, in the tropical zodiac, it's 3 degrees Leo, 30 minutes, to 13 degrees, 30 minutes. These are just approximate, but they're just in that area. Now, that's in 9 degrees to 19 degrees of Cancer. So there's a large empty area between Gemini and Cancer. Between the twins and the crab, twins and the crab, and they're not usually noted. But this is one of the factors I like using the actual constellations rather than just the sidereal. I would tend to go from what constellations are. Is it an empty space? Is it a constellation space? And what are the implications of it? We'll get a little bit more to this. I mean, you can spend weeks, months on just these things, but we're looking at overviews, we're expanding them. And you're thinking, well, wow, I can interpret my planets other ways, that's this influence, that's that energy. You're going to follow that a bit, but we got a lot to cover, and then we're going to put this together when these things are going to come in very useful when we come to look at it by progressions. There is a book I suggest you use. I like to keep the constellations as myths and stories. And there's a book by Alice Bailey, The Labors of Hercules. It was the last book she wrote before she died. In fact, she died before it finished, and her students finished it. But it's an excellent book on how, as the sun travels through through as the soul comes into life, it goes through 12 experiences to mature itself to an enlightened soul, and those 12 experiences are based on each constellation: the ram, the bull, the twins, the crab, and there's a challenge of the soul in each one. So that spiritual ascending side, that's a really nice thing. You guys have this in your, those of you that are the students that came through the student, you'll have this in your material. The others will see will get you a copy of the labors. So, but these labors are really worth reading. I don't use them all the time, but they're good to be in the background, and they expand your awareness of human experience, of mystical experience, beyond just the seasonal actions and the attitudinal factors. Some of the great intuitive writers in astrology over the centuries have used this, have had these mystical expressions. Now astrology is more psychological than spiritual. Not really, but it's going through a psychological renaissance or wave that tends to be scientific and psychological and diminish the spiritual. So there's the stars are still twinkling, the constellations are still there, these mysteries are still there, regardless of how you analyze them. So when we look at over here, when you see the constellation of Leo here on the bottom right, you see Leo. There's the head, body, and the tail. It's a big constellation. It occupies most of the constellation sidereal sign of Leo, but it's also in some of Cancer. It's also in some part of Cancer, sidereal Cancer. But it goes. Part of it is in Leo, and part of it's in Virgo. So in our tropical zodiac signs, only the last parts of Taurus, the last part of Taurus, the last part of Leo, and a few signs still have this sign of the zodiac and the constellation still being aligned. They're still aligned. They haven't moved totally out of sync yet. So you could say they have a special Leonian or Taurian nature. Okay, so the line goes from 1915 Leo to 2030 Virgo. Again, this is, I'm going to have to update this, but this is really 1950s epic. And so it's moved forward a little bit, probably 20 to 21, like so. Okay, and in the sidereal zodiac, it's 24, 45 Cancer to 26 Leo. So the constellation is mostly in Leo, but a bit of it's in Cancer.